our next guests will be having a really great conversation about DAOs. Kimball Musk and Rod Beckstrom. Let's have them enter the stage. There he is. Welcome, Kimball. Welcome, Rod. So Kimball Musk really requires no introduction. Serial entrepreneur, food activist, successful restaurateur, board member of SpaceX and Tesla, and now for the past year has been working on a new model of charity called the Big Green DAO, and he's going to be talking about that today. Rod Beckstrom is the former CEO of ICANN and has had all sorts of involvement in internet governments and venture projects for a number of years. Rod is also the author of 4 books, one of which had a big influence on me and led me to believe that he was the perfect person for this interview. It's called The Starfish and The Spider. If you haven't read it, I really recommend that you do. And in fact, at 4 p.m. you're doing a signing over at the bookstore, so go check it out. The book really dives into, and it's really prescient, this was written in 2006, it looks into the power of decentralized organizations. And you know, I think the analogy here is pretty interesting, right? We've got DAOs, which I think are the starfish, and the old centralized institutions are the spider. Rod's going to be able to make sense of what that all means, and Kimball's going to lay it all into this context. They're also going to do a deeper dive into this conversation at 1 o'clock over at the DAO House if you really want to go further into it. But for now, Rod, take it away. It's all yours.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much, Kimball. Wonderful to be here with you and with everyone in the audience. Why are we calling it the Starfish Moment? It's obvious why we're calling it the Big Green DAO. We're calling it the Starfish Moment because of the book that I co-authored. But when Kimball and I were preparing for this session, we learned an amazing piece of history, which is that we were both in New York on 9/11, and both of our lives changed that day, and the way our lives changed led to what we're doing right now, including my work with the Starfish and Spider and building decentralized organizations and the amazing work that Kimball's doing in the environment. So I wanted to briefly share my story. I was running a public financial software company I'd started in derivatives, and I was in New York, and when I watched the towers burn, I had 15 clients in the towers, and I was trying to figure out who was below the fire lines, because I figured out if they were below the fire line, they had a chance to survive if they could get out. But if they were above the fire line, and I knew many people above the fire line, it was going to be very difficult and dicey. And I wanted to go and help, but I couldn't get there. I've never felt so helpless in my life, seeing people suffer. And I thought, well, what can I do? And I realized, well, there's only one thing I can do. That is drop my bags and pray, close my eyes and pray. And so I prayed for the people in those towers. I prayed for God to release their suffering or reduce their suffering, because I knew that many would die. And I had a beautiful experience, and the following words came to me that have guided my life ever since. And those words apply to all of us, except for the last bit that's my mission. And those words are, it's a small world, it's a fragile world, and no one is safe until everyone is safe. And you are called to serve the peace. And that moment changed my life. And I've been committed to serving peace ever since. So I dropped all my business obligations at that time, except I was chairman of a venture-backed company that just raised $37 million, building one of the first VPNs in the world for consumers, for privacy. I couldn't leave that. Everything else I dropped completely. And I built a peace network with CEOs. And I had a crazy design idea, which was to model it on Al-Qaeda. Because I said, they're so powerful with limited resources, we want to counter that. Well, that begged the question of how's Al-Qaeda organized? And over the next year, I figured out it's one of the most incredible decentralized organizations in the world and how it was architected and designed. Bone-chillingly good design. So I was studying Al-Qaeda. Many people then said I was an Al-Qaeda expert of the world. And I was building a peace network that grew to 4,000 CEOs, 1,300 registered online within a year. And the energy was incredible because we organized circles and CEOs got to do whatever they wanted to do. But it was an amazing experience, and people were like, God, you figured out how decentralization works, you got to share this with the world. So I said, okay, let's write it in a book. So we need to write it. So we wrote The Starfish and The Spider, which is a handbook on decentralization. It actually explains how decentralized organizations work, what the components are, what the strategy is for competing with centralized organizations and vice versa. And then I got to apply it again. The director of national intelligence really liked the book, so he and the president asked me to come in and run all the cyber centers for the US government, which I did. My military rank was 2.5 star. I guess I have to cut one of these off, but in protocol rank. But I coordinated all the cyber centers across military and intel using these decentralization concepts, and it was very successful. And then after I left there, and Vint Cerf and other people, Vint's kind of the father of the internet, urged me to go run ICANN, which is a global internet coordination organization that's massive, decentralized, multi-stakeholder body that's had tens of thousands of people involved. We use the principles of the book again. So, and I've seen it in many companies. In fact, in the audience, I saw somewhere Heidi here. Heidi runs in Sacramento a school, and when I met her last night, she goes, I know your book, and we used it in my school to go completely revamp how we run the organization. So it's a book on decentralization. That's how my life changed. I'm just so excited to explore this DAO today, the big green DAO, Kimball, with you. Kimball is such an exceptional human being. Okay, there's not many people walking this planet who have participated, not in creating unicorns, but in 3 centi-unicorns, okay, from the early days. PayPal, worth over 100 billion, Tesla, worth over $1 trillion at one point, and SpaceX now. Congratulations on the fundraising. And he's not only done that, but a lot of tremendous work in other parts of the world that we're going to hear about now. So, Kimball, please share with us your 9/11 story.
Sure.
And how it sets you on this path.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's a fascinating community, the Web3 community. I've always found you guys, and the reason I'm in it is just fascinating. You guys are young, you guys have energy, you're super smart, and it's been a wonderful journey for me the past 1.5 years or so working in Web3. So my 9/11 story, I actually lived a few blocks from the World Trade Centers. I was woken up to the sounds of the plane hitting the building. And I got to, with my wife at the time, we got down to Canal Street by the time the first one fell. We were running, literally just running, and saw the first one fall. It was this giant wall of white smoke coming down and white dust, and people driving out of it at high speeds, people holding onto the outside of cars. We got to Union Square where we saw the second one fall, and it really was, when you're so close to it, you don't actually see it fall. You see it burn, you don't see it fall. And then got to Union Square, see the second one fall, and it felt like reality breaking. And I say that because it broke my path of my life, which was very much a traditional path in the tech world. I was working on amazing technology companies and decided to focus on food. I got this. I'm a classically trained chef, so I got this opportunity to cook for the firefighters. And down in ground zero, right by the giant piles of melting metal, feeding them, and they would come in covered in dust, take off their outer shells and their inner shells, and we would feed them this beautiful food, and they would reconnect with each other, and they'd come back to life as they connected with each other, and they ate the food we were serving them, and then they went back out to find American lives to save. I mean, it was just one of the most powerful and moving experiences. So for me, that's where I changed paths, and I said, I'm going to work in the restaurant world, work with food, really bringing joy to people's lives. Food for me is one of those ways. I'm now learning other ways to do it. Big Green DAO is 20 years later, and when I learned about this concept of a decentralized autonomous organization where you could engage a different level of person to help make real decisions, and I mean real decisions, not like advisory decisions. The Web3 technology allows us, all of us, to leverage the talent and knowledge of everyone in the DAO. And if you do it correctly, you do it well through smart contracts that people can see. There's this term trustless out there, but it really enables you to build trust with your community because your rights cannot be taken away. And as a result, what Big Green DAO does, we fund nonprofits in America. We are able to go international, but we're focused on the United States right now. We take funding, we take donations in. If you donate over 1 Ethereum, you get to vote. And then it's progressively decentralizing. So we started out with 6 nonprofits, incredible nonprofits that we knew well. We knew where they were the not necessarily the best, but some of the best in the country. And they were really excited to actually have a say in how funding would be given to other nonprofits. They brought on 10 new nonprofits, so they can vote for other nonprofits. They can't vote for themselves, so they brought on 10, and then we brought on a few donors, so there are 19 voters this quarter, and we can bring on up to 86 nonprofits this quarter, and we have a budget this quarter to donate about $860,000, so about 86, at a minimum donation of $10,000. This quarter was the first time we've opened it up to the nonprofit world, and we are over 400 applications so far. So
amazing.
The 19 people that are part of this DAO will use quadratic funding, where you'll get a certain amount of points, and if you try to put all your points into one nonprofit, you start to lose your voting strength. It takes 1 point to assign a point to one nonprofit, but if you assign more points to the same nonprofit, it takes another 4 points to give the same amount of power.
Let's talk about that quadratic voting for a second.
Sure.
It's kind of a fun innovation. It's a
Sure.
little complex. It throws a little spice in the mix.
Yeah.
And I mean, it gets people thinking more.
It's about getting them thinking, exactly.
Okay.
And collaborating, because if you cannot if you cannot be favoritism, you actually have to get people in the DAO to join you in a vote you're making.
Right.
And so that's the most fun part
But
about
if
it.
they give too much and commit too much, they lose power in the future. So you're saying
Exactly.
it's kind
Actually,
of a
that's
trade-off.
another great thing about the DAO, because we're progressively decentralizing. Every time we have a grant-making round, the previous people who had so much power, and it's very exciting to have that power, are giving up power.
Yes. So
And that's very cool.
I think one of the cool things we were talking about, Kimball, is how you really try to design this thing so no one could accumulate too much power. And by the way, trustless is a word that works for me. The word I prefer is to say, rather than trusting institutions, we're trusting systems and communities. So I look at it in the positive sense of the trust, is to get onto your term. But if you look at where you're taking this, it's phenomenal in the buy-in. And I want you to touch also on how in the design you want to check the power, and also how you insert humans to make sure abuses don't run and go too far. Or can you think that through, and even how you use the U.S. government?
I'm having some fun chats over Twitter right now where people will say to me, a DAO is not really decentralized. Mm-hmm. It's okay if out of 1,000 people, 2 or 3 people have all the power, or most of the power, and other people just get to participate a little bit. Like, okay, that's fine, but isn't decentralized in the name?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, guys.
Doesn't quite go with monopoly. So is monopoly different than decentralized?
Exactly. And so I think that the fascinating conversation that's happening in the DAO world is how much do you have to be decentralized to be decentralized? And I think the most important guiding light is to have systems in place that prevent the accumulation of power to one person. And if you do not have those in place, frankly, I think most DAOs are designed to allow the founders to maintain control. And if you allow that to happen, I don't believe you will survive. Mm-hmm. I think that if you want to be a DAO, if you want to actually create great things, you really have to design it where you lose control. And I remember going through that. So I'm used to being a CEO. I'm used to command and control. Do what I say, and if it fails, it's on me. But if it succeeds, it's because it's the plan and approach that I decided. And with a DAO, I had to literally feel, giving up control. It was a feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, wow, I don't do this.
Thing, right?
It was a visceral thing to say, I am giving up control of this beautiful thing that I've spent 10,000 hours working on. And now I'm going to give up control. I can literally feel it in my body right now. It's like it's a painful feeling. And
but then the surprises come, right?
Yeah,
later the surprises.
Absolutely.
Come.
And I think that the cool thing is everyone should go through that process. It's actually do we really have control? Not really. It's just a human nature thing to pretend we have control.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was a beautiful thing to go through myself. We started out with 6 nonprofits. I've watched them go through the process of giving up control, and we have this beautiful conversation going on. One of the things about your book is great. He talks about the Apache Native American tribes basically winning against the U.S. government for 400 years.
Spanish and U.S. government.
And they had a decentralized approach to governance, so you couldn't take out the leaders because they were decentralized. And one of our core members of the DAO, her name's Ade, she's from the Cochiti tribe. And we have these wonderful discussions around governance that you could never have if I had the power. Because she would have to be more, she'd have to be, I guess, a little bit more polite or whatever, or maybe she might hold back a bit.
Subservient or whatever.
Because we have equal power, in fact, she has more power than I do, we have very honest conversations about governance. And I think that is one of the greatest things about a DAO. And so if you guys are building a DAO and you wanted to have this kind of, not just fluidity, better decision-making, but it also can't go away.
Yes.
Which is amazing. Like DAOs they just can't go away. How do you stop it? It just can't be stopped. Yes. You should really understand the importance of not allowing individuals to accumulate power.
Absolutely. And talk about a few of the mechanisms you put in there, because one thing I see that decentralized organizations miss sometimes is, for example, the ability to remove a member from a committee. And if you can't remove a member, then you're inviting abuse at some point. But you did that, a lot of other control checkpoints, like what you did with the Gnosis wallet and the Treasury. Can you just talk about a few of those?
Sure.
And how you balance it, because you're kind of putting more structure in.
Yeah, so one of the things we did with our DAO committee, 6 people, we put term limits on. I mean, it's a pretty normal concept, but actually doesn't really exist in DAOs, very few DAOs, where the founders actually, they term out. Mm-hmm. And you can get voted back in, but in order to get voted back in, you have to burn your token and you are out. Mm-hmm. And it's a time when you will feel an enormous sense of loss not being part of the DAO. And you also don't know if you're going to get voted back in.
You're in limbo, so you're in limbo.
You're in limbo, exactly. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. And so we have term limits. And then if you're a nonprofit and you have, just so you know, in order to get a vote, unlike most DAOs, ours is a philanthropic DAO. So you get a vote by receiving money, not by, you can provide money and you'll be able to vote as a donor. But the most interesting part is if you receive funding as a nonprofit, you get to vote. But if you want to receive funding the following year, you can receive funding every year. You have to burn up your token and you are not part of the voting process at all. You can't vote for anyone.
Which is good to avoid conflicts of interest, right, or collusion.
And we want community to be built. So if we're thinking about, imagine you're a nonprofit, you're in Austin, you're doing amazing food justice work in the schools here, and you know that your time is coming up where you want to receive more funding, you're going to be more active on the Discord. You're going to be more connected to the community. You're going to do things that might be selfless. You might help out other nonprofits. You might kind of become a more positive, more giving member of that community, because from a self-interest perspective, you're going to want to be voted back in.
Right, absolutely. So I want to talk about one of the concepts in the book is what we call the sweet spot, or finding the sweet spot. So, every organization exists on a continuum between totally centralized, top-down, and totally decentralized, or extremely decentralized. So North Korea would be an example of an extremely centralized organization, okay? It's far on this end. And a total chaos is just beyond total decentralization, by the way. Because decentralization, there has to be structure. And you got to look at what that structure is. And the design question for organizations is, where do you want to be on that continuum, in overall as an organization or for your project? And so you look at what you created in the Big Green, the parent organization. To me, that's a fairly centralized.
That is a spider. That is a traditional top-down. We give grants around the country, and I approve every single grant. It is an ivory tower. I admit it. And by the way, we are trying very hard to do good things.
And you are.
With the DAO, we are doing the opposite.
Yes.
We are giving all of the power over to the community.
Yes.
And the jury is out on who does a better job. And frankly, I think both will continue to exist. There'll be hierarchical structures. I know many foundations, and everyone is trying to do a good job. Everyone has the best interests at heart. But if you're a foundation, you're spending 15%. Talk about you mentioned earlier just the cost of these centralized organizations is so high.
Absolutely.
If you run a foundation, you're spending 15% of your funding on overhead, administration, managing the grants, accounting for the grants. Then you have 25% from the nonprofit's perspective that they can allocate to fundraising. So let's imagine you're in a foundation, you're giving $100 million away a year. you start with 60 million going to the nonprofits for actual work on the ground.
Exactly.
With our DAO, we allow 5% overhead for management. So you're starting at 95% compared to 60. Even if we're not even that good, we're probably going to do a better job because we have more money to give.
If you just throw darts at an average,
we're still probably going to do a better job. But what's great about it is I think we're going to do a better job. I think when I watch the quality of nonprofits that are coming in and the systems that the DAO is building around quadratic voting that helps you create ranked choice as well as it's a 2-week voting process where you can make all your votes, you can see how it all lands, and then you watch the results, and then you go into the Discord, and you can discuss it with people, and you can go in and change your vote.
Oh, you can.
It's a 2-week discussion amongst the Discord over who should be in and who should not, and how much should they be.
Fantastic.
And we did this intentionally because we don't quite know how to.
Sure.
It's all an experiment for us. We don't quite know how to do this.
The fact, what's beautiful is engagement. Even the way you develop the light paper you got to read. If you have any interest in DAOs, read the light paper that he and Matthew Markman were primary drafters of, but then he's going to tell how it got collaborated on, but it is a beautiful constitutional governance document. And Kimball and I both agree, governance is where it's at in DAOs. If you want to have a great DAO that serves the world, lasts a long term, you got to focus on the governance. But talk a little bit about how the drafting process worked. And
it was fascinating. So I'm new to Web3 in the past year and a half, and I kind of know what I don't know. Like I honestly really find this space drinking from a fire hose, learning all the time, when I started this process with some friends of mine who were helping me, some of them are in the audience here, even with the group around us, I was like, I don't think we know enough. And we reached out to the leaders in the Web3 community, and these are all people you would know. And I asked them nicely, I was like, would you be open to collaborating on this white paper? And it was a philanthropic DAO, so there was absolutely zero way for people to make money. There was no speculation at all. And the resounding answer was yes. And we got 50 collaborators. We did a Google Doc that I shared personally with all of them, and we had comments. We had 5 to 10 hours of debates with each person. And as a result, we created this white paper. You can find it at dao.biggreen.org. It's available to anyone. We've had over 5,000 people review it in detail. So please learn from it. It really has been an amazing process. But the collaboration amongst the Web3 community, the desire for all of them to want this to succeed is beautiful.
So I want to take this, normally when I'm talking to most people, Kimball, I talk about moonshots. But for you, I don't think that's good enough, right? I mean, the Mars is 600 times farther.
It's already in the schedule.
Yeah, so I know, you're right. You're not only working on getting us to Mars, but you're developing the food, how to grow food on Mars. So I want to talk about Mars Shot. Of this DAO, you've stated you also want to help revolutionize the world of philanthropy.
Yeah.
So let's go to the bigger vision and where this can roll out into other sectors. I know you've even thought already about other sectors this might go into. But
yeah, absolutely.
Long-term vision, if you will.
So the vision here, my philanthropy is focused on food justice in America. It's my personal passion. As I mentioned, 9/11. I've had a few other life-changing moments that have shown me the power of how food can change people's lives. Big Green believes growing food changes lives. It improves your nutrition security, your mental health. It gets you out into nature. It opens your eyes to the weather volatility of climate change. Growing food changes lives. It's so beautiful. That being said, there are many other very important things out there to solve. And we designed this so that any philanthropic movement can look at it, copy it exactly, copy it partially. And what we've learned in this process is there are some categories that are really valuable for DAOs. And when it comes to a DAO, if you guys are thinking about doing a DAO, think about how does decentralized decision-making help? So for example, we were approached by a climate change group that wanted to do a DAO. And at a very high level, I said, look, I don't really understand how a DAO could help climate change. You've got to deal with governments, you've got to deal with things. I mean, you probably need to do it at the United Nations level. You're going to need a leader. You're going to need someone lobbying and so forth. And they actually came to me and said, actually, there's a category of what we're working on, which is deforestation. And so when you think about deforestation, you're talking about preventing the Amazon from being burnt across a 3,000-mile border of land to forest, just that alone. And across that area, you have members of those communities that can join the DAO. There's people in those communities that will receive funding from the DAO to not burn down their forest on their land. And you don't just get decentralized decision-making, which is very important, because you'll be able to decide which farmers or which recipients should receive funding to not burn down their forest. You also get decentralized accountability, because trying to get accountability across 3,000 miles of forest line is basically impossible. But if you decentralize accountability and they're part of the DAO, now you really start to cook with gas. Like, it's really great.
It's like what we did in oceans policy to create sustainable fisheries. Is we turn in, there used to be fishing quotas. We turn them into catch shares where the fishermen own the fish stock.
Yeah.
And then they protect and preserve the fish stock and get a certain harvest. So the same thing, when you flip the economics and make them owners instead of some others that you know.
It's really about decentralized decision-making, decentralized accountability. Now you really should be thinking about a DAO, because I think it becomes invaluable. Compare it to hierarchical structures, and it just will crush them. And there are times when hierarchical structures should exist, but I think that when you another one that has been proposed to me, which I think is great, is police reform. So in America, we have a real problem with police reform, and it's a complicated problem, and it's a local problem. If you are in Austin, police reform is different to Dallas, it's different to Fort Worth, it's different to San Antonio, it's different to Houston. North Austin is probably different to South Austin. And so that's when you start to get real value from decentralized decision-making, decentralized accountability, and you start building community in a way that everyone has something to add.
Absolutely.
It's really beautiful.
The way we say, right, that when you create good decentralized systems, we get many different emergent properties, like exciting things happen on your DAO committee. And we learned that the intelligence is at the edge of the network.
Yeah.
And because people are participating, they're bringing that intelligence in. And that process, by the way, is what's made the internet what it is.
Yeah.
The internet is led by the IETF, which doesn't even have standards. They have RFCs, which are requests for comments. And once the comments have stabilized, companies can adopt them or not adopt them. That's how IP works. That's how the whole internet works. And ICANN that I ran is so complex with multi-stakeholder voices and processes. It's slow, it seems like grinding. But once you get to the end line, you know, the buy-in's amazing.
The front line of nonprofit work in food justice, just like you were describing in the internet, is they are the most educated people.
Yep.
And we have never tapped into their knowledge, never, which is embarrassing, never tapped into their knowledge to help improve grant making to other nonprofits in their similar front line. So if you're doing food justice in Atlanta, in South Atlanta, and you're working on one of our amazing DAO members is a African-American woman named One Day, worked to allow farm stands to be in black neighborhoods. It's allowed in white neighborhoods. It's actually against the law in black neighborhoods. It's just like so sad. And she fought and she won. She's going to know so much more about South Atlanta or the category of farm stands than anyone else in any foundation in the world, any government member as well. And so you now add that voice to a DAO. You do not get better information than that. And so the power of bringing the knowledge from the edges, from the front lines into the community, into the decision making, where they can see their rights. They know that if they are loud about something, no one can take their rights away. That's also very important.
Kimball, we got about 1 minute. I'd like to do an exercise here. Engage the audience a bit and then talk about once you think about what they're going to be able to do going forward. But how many of you have participated in a DAO? Okay, and how many of you are interested in participating in a DAO? Or, wow, that's great. How many of you are interested in maybe creating or designing a DAO? Oh, awesome. Wow, this is the right crowd. We're going to continue this conversation at 1 o'clock at the DAO House, by the way, and maybe go a little deeper. It'll be a smaller group. But Kimball, can you talk to them in our last moments here? How can they get involved with the Big Green DAO? What are the different ways?
Absolutely. So go to dao.biggreen.org. You can donate no minimum, so $1, and you'll get access to the Discord to be able to just learn at a high level. If you want to vote as a donor, you donate 1 Ethereum, and then you will get voting rights. You'll get to join in this amazing process. And I think that if you're going to form a DAO, there's no better way to learn than to go vote. Absolutely. And see the issues, because there are going to have plenty of issues as well, and so you will be able to apply that learning to your own. And of course, if you are a nonprofit in food justice, or you know someone in food justice, please let them know there's no charge for a nonprofit to join the Discord. There's no charge for them to apply. An application is, give us 2 sentences plus your Instagram account or your Twitter account.
Right. And they've got until this Sunday, right?
And they've got until Sunday evening to apply for this quarter. Of course, there'll be other granting rounds.
So I want, go ahead.
Go ahead, no, please.
I want to ask the audience for one other thing that's participatory. Please stand up. Please stand up. Join me in standing up, wherever you are. Give this wonderful man a hand for what he and the Big Green DAO and his team are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you all.